Historically, Idaho ranks at or near the bottom of the barrel when it comes to state funding for public education.
The formula for how public schools are funded looked different before the pandemic than it did during the pandemic. And today, many school districts will likely receive less money than they did the last few years.
Yeah, as the new school year begins, our Aspen Shumpert explored why that is and whether funding relates to test scores at all.
Schools are the heart of their community. They are a cornerstone of what happens.
Wednesday, the start of a new school year for Idaho's public school students. Also, the second year of an attendance-based funding method. It's how schools received funding pre-COVID. When COVID hit, the state switched to enrollment-based funding. Sonia Galavis, an Idaho State representative on the Education Committee, has also been a public school teacher for 20 years. She says enrollment-based funding gave schools a significant increase.
They could have more clear and predictable budgets because they knew how many kids were enrolled in their district, so they knew what the funding was going to be.
The formula switched back to funding on a daily attendance average at the start of the 2023 school year.
We saw tens of millions of dollars of reduction in our schools across Idaho.
Our schools are funded by the students that they have and that come to school, but it isn't a straight one-to-one. It's not, and it is an amount, but that amount is put together through a formula that takes in all of the components of what it takes to run a classroom. It can be very complex.
State Superintendent Debbie Critchfield says around 60 to 70% of a school district's funding formula comes from state funding, about 10 to 15% from local taxes, and another 10 to 15% of federal funding.
State money for us really goes towards everything from curriculum to maintaining our buildings to paying for teacher staff, for staffing in our buildings.
But to some, the average attendance funding isn't enough.
No matter who is gone on a daily basis in my classroom, I still have to keep the lights on. I still have to be there. I still need all the materials. We still need all the professionals and educators who are meeting the needs of the school at large. And so we don't see a reduction of cost, even though we're being funded less than enrollment.
And when it comes to state funding for public education, Idaho as a whole spends the least amount of money per student compared to the rest of the states in the country, according to a July report from education.org.
I think it's unfortunate that we're at the bottom all the time, but it's a complex situation.
One of the reasons that we see a lower per student amount has a lot to do with the fact that we don't collect a lot of taxes in our state. And that's something that our citizens have agreed to and that we like, and we send people to the legislature that want to continue to support and defend that. And so we look at other states who have a higher tax rate and just handle their budgets differently, and certainly they have more dollars to send out. But then when we look at the fact that Idaho has prioritized education and takes the biggest chunk of all of the revenue coming in and sending that to education, really signals that we do care about it.
Idaho's 6 largest public school districts spend anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 per student, according to the data from the State Department of Education. While Idaho's 6 smallest public schools on average spend $17,000 to $49,000 per student. But the spending per student can be deceptive.
If you take like the Prairie School District or some of these very small one schoolhouse, it looks like they're spending $20,000 on each student, but they also have 6 kids enrolled in the district. And so when you manipulate that divisor, it gives the appearance that a lot of money is being spent on the student, but in reality, it's the overhead and operational cost that it takes to run the whole school district.
School districts ask voters for additional funding by passing levies and bonds. Bonds think buildings, levies think operations and staff.
Across the board, there isn't a community that would tell you it's easy to pass a supplemental levy or a school bond. We're all feeling the pinch. Our paycheck doesn't go as far. It costs more to go to the grocery store. It costs more to fill up a tank of gas. Everyone is feeling that. I think across the state, you're going to find people who absolutely support education, but are also voter fatigued and tax fatigued.
Some districts with levies failing to pass are forced to make budget cuts, letting staff go, and some even closing schools. like Nampa and Caldwell school districts.
But it's never easy to see something that's beloved as a school, close.
The former blaming a drop in enrollment over the last decade, and Caldwell blaming the funding model changes.
It's heartbreaking because you know that it's preventable. You know that there are ways that we can fund that more adequately get the dollars to where they're needed, that we have an opportunity to look at our funding formula and see if we're addressing the needs.
But is there a correlation between funding amounts and test scores? And how do we compare to other states who spend more per student? Each state tests differently for reading, math, and science, so making comparisons gets tricky. But there is one type of test you can compare countrywide, according to Galavis, the NAEP test, the National Assessment of Education Progress.
So it's a randomized test. They will come in and pick the school district. They will pick the 4th grade or 8th grade classroom. And when you look at those scores, Idaho does really well, at or above the national average for grade level benchmark.
Compared to California, Washington, and Oregon, Idaho's 2022 NAEP scores were higher than those 3 states. But all 4 states took a slight dip in NAEP scores. Scores from 2019 before the pandemic were slightly higher.
And I believe we're back to pre-pandemic scores and still growing.
We know that there's learning taking place, and that's what we want for every student.
Experts tell me money is not the only factor that can impact test scores. Galavis says other factors like household demographics, learning disabilities, or language barriers can play a role. Dismuke says even a student's motivation to take the test that day impacts scores. Back to you.